Glenn, Donald Trump has just issued a not so thinly veiled threat against Jack Smith in the event that Donald Trump is to win this election. Can you explain what he just said?
Yeah, Donald Trump is proudly and enthusiastically lawless because he just said that if he wins the election, he will fire special counsel Jack Smith, quote, in 2 seconds, close quote. Now, we have to take a step back because not that Donald Trump cares, but a president actually can't fire special counsel. But what can a president do? A president can appoint a lawless attorney general who is willing to do the president's bidding and fire anybody and everybody, including special counsel. You know, this may remind our viewers of the Saturday Night Massacre in the Nixon administration back in 1973, when a special prosecutor, not unlike Jack Smith, Archibald Cox, issued a subpoena for Nixon's tapes, the tapes that would ultimately be the downfall of Richard Nixon. Nixon didn't like that one bit, so what did he do? He ordered his Attorney General, Elliot Richardson, to fire the special prosecutor, Archibald Cox. Richardson said, nope, and he promptly resigned. So then Richard Nixon told his Deputy Attorney General, the number 2 at the Department of Justice, William Ruckelshaus, I want you to fire the special prosecutor. And Ruckelshaus said, nope, and he resigned. But then Richard Nixon found a winner, number 3 at the Department of Justice, Robert Bork, who was the Solicitor General. And then Archibald Cox got borked because Bork carried out Richard Nixon's corrupt directive to fire Archibald Cox, the special prosecutor. Interestingly, the court would go on to rule down the road that that firing was not lawful. Donald Trump doesn't care about any of that. Donald Trump probably doesn't understand any of that. So he said, I, the president, if elected, will fire special counsel Jack Smith in 2 seconds. Let's take him at his word.
Right. And obviously that raises the specter of who the Attorney General is. Just yesterday, you and I did an episode of The Legal Breakdown where we discussed the prospect of Judge Aileen Cannon being the person on the short list to be Donald Trump's Attorney General. So knowing what we already know about how she's ruled with regard to special counsels, that is why she dismissed the classified documents case down in Florida. That wouldn't be a far stretch for her to then do Donald Trump's bidding and go ahead and fire Jack Smith within, quote, 2 seconds.
You know, Brian, let's pull these two news stories together because in Trump world, 1 + 1 equals lawlessness all the time. So as you said yesterday, we were talking about how Donald Trump said, you know what, I'm considering Judge Aileen Cannon to be my Attorney General. Aileen Cannon, who in lawless fashion, without precedent, dismissed Donald Trump's classified documents, obstruction of justice, espionage case down in Florida. Donald Trump was obviously pleased with that result and said, you know what, I'm thinking about appointing Aileen Cannon as my Attorney General. Now, here's the thing, Brian. No judge in the country other than Aileen Cannon has ever ruled that a special counsel or an independent prosecutor is unlawful or unconstitutional. Why? Because they're not. There is no law supporting that proposition. Every judge who has been called upon to rule has ruled, of course, special counsel is lawful and constitutional. Aileen Cannon went the other way with that, and it's not surprising. Donald Trump said, ooh, she looks good to be my Attorney General. So pulling these two stories together, what is he going to do? He's going to tell her, fire Jack Smith, special counsel, because, Aileen Cannon, you've already ruled that he is not constitutionally appointed anyway, so this should be an easy call for you. So we will not have an Attorney General, Aileen Cannon, acting from a place of principle like Elliot Richardson or William Ruckelshaus when they said, I'm not going to follow a corrupt directive from a criminal president and get rid of Archibald Cox, then special prosecutor. So you can see what Donald Trump is putting in place. I don't have it in me to call Donald Trump an evil genius. I'll just call him evil, and he has found a plan that he's willing to exploit to make himself, Donald Trump, the defense counsel in his case, the prosecutor in his case, the judge in his case, the jury in his case, and he's already declared that he is not guilty of all charges and he will not even allow himself to be put on trial.
You know, Glenn, if Trump was to win the election, and of course we all know that he would remove special counsel Jack Smith, that doesn't necessarily mean that the prosecutions against him would go away just because Jack Smith unto himself is gone. But what are the mechanics of ending those prosecutions from that point? Because, of course, you know, the first thing that he would do is seek to dismantle or withdraw the DOJ's prosecutions against him, his own DOJ's prosecutions against him as president. So what would that look like in practice?
So in practice, first of all, we have to recognize that Donald Trump has no allegiance to the law, to the Constitution, to any rules of procedure when it comes to how criminal cases are to be handled in our criminal justice system. So it's interesting that the Aileen Cannon angle, where he would order her to fire Jack Smith, and she'd be all too happy to do it because in her opinion, he's not legally appointed anyway, that's almost beside the point, because he would also undoubtedly direct Aileen Cannon, his attorney general, to dismiss his federal cases, to tell the Department of Justice whether they're being pursued by special counsel or a regular old federal prosecutor, just get rid of them. I'm telling you, I didn't do anything wrong. I am ordering you to dismiss the cases, withdraw the charges. And undoubtedly, an Aileen Cannon, who has proved that she's not an honest broker of the law, would do it. So, you know, all of the special counsel machinations are interesting. But at the end of the day, Donald Trump will undoubtedly have his Justice Department decline to prosecute him for all of the crimes he in fact committed against the American people.
Does that then raise the importance of the state prosecutions against him? And again, using this thought experiment, if Donald Trump was to win the election, the prosecutions, even in the states, wouldn't be able to move forward so long as he's president. So they would kind of be put on ice. They wouldn't go away, but they would be put on ice, or at least they wouldn't go away normally under normal circumstances, which is to say nothing of what he would try and do while he's president. But operating under normal circumstances, they would be put on ice. So does that again raise the importance of these pending prosecutions against him in the states where he doesn't have the power to just wave his magic wand and make them go away?
You know, it does in theory, certainly, because, for example, a presidential pardon doesn't help him out. If he were to pardon himself, that might get him out of federal charges, although that's an open question. There's never been a court that has ruled whether a presidential self-pardon is lawful or not.
I wouldn't feel great putting it in the hands of this court, though.
Not this Supreme Court, that's for sure. But you're right. The state court prosecutions, one, are immune from presidential pardons. Two, are not within the control of the Attorney General or the U.S. Department of Justice. They're in control of the states, the state prosecutors, and the states are separate sovereigns. They run completely independent, the state court prosecutions, from the federal court prosecutions and the federal Department of Justice. So all of this is a lovely thought experiment. Oh, what if Donald Trump actually abided by the law and only put his state cases on hold, on ice, while he was the sitting president, and there is some support for a state not being allowed to proceed in a criminal case against the sitting president while he's in office, but it doesn't extinguish the charges permanently. But let's face it, this is the Donald Trump who has been doubling, tripling, and quadrupling down on doing what? Deploying the military against his enemies from within, who he has named as, among others, Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff.
Right, not exactly somebody who's brimming with respect for the sovereignty of the states.
Exactly. Do we really think he doesn't put in the basket of enemies from within Fani Willis, Alvin Bragg, any state court prosecutor who has the nerve to try to hold him accountable for violations of the state law that he undoubtedly committed when he was trying to steal the 2020 election. So it's a great thought experiment. I've enjoyed going through it with you and our viewers, but it won't matter because Donald Trump will just use the military to go against his enemies.
Well, look, all of that underscores the importance of making sure that right now, when we actually have the opportunity to act on all of this, that we do that we make our voices heard. For those who are watching right now, if you've watched this Legal Breakdown series for the last however many years we've been doing it, Glenn, I think this is actually our 400th episode right now of the Legal Breakdown. So for our viewers out there, if you've sat and watched and gone through the ways in which Donald Trump has perverted and manipulated and exploited and just outright ignored our legal system, now is the time to actually do something about it. We don't want to be in a position where we're looking back and wishing that we could do more. So our request for all of you is twofold here. It is, one, to find people in your circles who haven't yet voted, maybe aren't planning on voting, and make them your responsibility in this election. I've said before how the difference in 2020 in Wisconsin, for example, between a Biden win and a Trump win was 2 votes per precinct. That's all it would have taken for Donald Trump to flip the state of Wisconsin, 2 votes per precinct. So everybody has the opportunity right now to have an outsized impact in this election just by virtue of finding people in your circles who weren't planning to vote or who are choosing right now between the ballot box and the couch. And the second part of that is, if you have the opportunity to vote early, make sure you go and do that, whether in person or by mail. Allow these campaigns that are targeting you right now. If you're a Democratic voter, we're talking about Kamala Harris's campaign, the Senate campaigns in your state, the House races in your state, to focus their resources elsewhere. These campaigns know whether or not you voted. They don't know who you voted for, but they know if you voted. So once you get your ballots in, once you've already voted, they can then focus their resources and their personnel and their money and their get out the vote efforts onto those true undecided voters out there. So those are just 2 small steps that we can all take on an individual basis to make sure that we have some impact in this election here, and to make sure that Donald Trump, somebody who for 400 episodes now of this Legal Breakdown series, we have spoken about how lawless this guy is, how dangerous he would be in a second term, to make sure that he doesn't get anywhere near the levers of power again.
And Brian, if I could add a footnote in addition to your urging the viewers to get out and vote early, I also view it as, at least in part, a public safety issue. I'm still seeing these missives from Donald Trump and his flunkies saying, hey, sign up to be a Republican poll watcher, sign up to be a poll watcher for Trump and company. Listen, that has nefarious overtones. He is urging people to go to the polls and watch to see, obviously, who might be casting their ballots for Harris and Walz. So if you can get to the polls early, if your jurisdiction allows it, before Election Day, I also see that as something of a public safety issue. I think you're less likely to run into Donald Trump's trolls at the polls. Now, I wouldn't discourage anybody from voting on Election Day if that's what you have to do. But there are so many good reasons, as Brian just explained, to get out to the polls early.
Perfectly put. Again, for those who are watching right now, to continue watching this series and to support our work, the links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.